that?
So we do the O.J. Simpson thing, and we have an amazing result. A number of years go by, and more of us are getting interested in this thing, this kind of idea of taking random number generators and seeing whether we can detect the world reacting to it. So an unhappy event occurred where Princess Di died in an accident. And somewhat similar to the O.J. thing, everyone knew a week in advance that there was going to be a live broadcast of the funeral. And this was such a shock around the world that we knew that it would probably attract something like 1 billion viewers live. So in this case, we had 12 colleagues, each of whom had a similar kind of random number generator around the world, and we all got together and recorded data before, during, and after the funeral, and came up with a formal test to see whether or not there was a deviation in the generators. And as it turned out, there was a significant deviation among all of these generators around the world. Another year or so goes by, and we start thinking, these one-shot experiments are interesting, but we're going to miss things that happen spontaneously. Like, it would have been interesting to know what would have happened when the first news broadcast went out that Princess Di had died. So this generated the notion of the Global Consciousness Project, which was headed by Roger Nelson at Princeton. And the idea is to take random number generators, locate them around the world, run them 24 hours a day, and every 5 minutes send all the data up to a single web server at Princeton. So we have a continuous record, and we've had it now for 8 years, a continuous record of randomness from around the world. We have data now for 2 kinds of events, 2 basic types of events. We have planned events like Y2K. It was, again, a moment of a stroke of midnight where everyone was going to be paying attention in each time zone. We also have spontaneous events like 9/11 that weren't planned. But we're able to look at all of them now in terms of what happened to this randomness, this physical measure of randomness around the world, when a lot of minds suddenly became focused on something. And the short story of this is we have hundreds of events now, both planned and unplanned. And it is very clear that overall, the randomness is not as random as it ought to be, by theory, when these events are occurring. Large-scale events that attract a lot of attention create a certain mental coherence, which seems to be reflected in what's going on in random generators around the world. So that's one thing of interest. The second thing of interest is, and we noticed this first when 9/11 occurred, we analyzed it very closely to see what was happening. There were 37 random generators running that day. If you go into the data and you look at it over the course of the day, 9/11, you find a very unusual statistical structure in the data. You find a 6 standard deviation change. It's as though, if you think about the results of this experiment like a bell shape, we're constantly recreating a bell-shaped curve. That's what the statistics look like. And we're interested in, how does the bell ring? How does it swing? How does it vibrate over time? That's the way that a way of thinking about the statistic. On 9/11, the bell rang extremely loud. It swung hard in one direction and it swung hard in the other direction, basically. And then we thought, well, that's unusual. So we compared it to other days. We started comparing it to more and more days around 9/11, and it turns out that 9/11, within the year 2001, was the loudest ringing of the bell. Well, it was probably also the most focused day of attention for 2001 and maybe since then. The other thing that was interesting is that the bell started to swing before 8:30 in the morning Eastern Time. It began to swing noticeably before the events unfolded, which suggested something like a premonition. There was something beginning to build statistically that then basically exploded at them when the events unraveled, but something was a premonition.